Hey guys, welcome back to Bridging the Gap. I am your co-host, Cinnamon, and I'm coming back to you for episode 8. Today's topic is going to be a little bit more heavier than the ones that we've done so far. In last year, I wrote an argumentative essay about MAID. If you don't know what MAID is, it's basically medical assistance in dying, or it's also euthanasia as some people reference to it. I was basically writing an article, and not an article but an essay, and I did a lot of research to prepare for this, so I think that I'm well enough versed on the topic to just discuss about it. My argument was actually geared towards MAID should be offered to those who meet the requirement, and I just wanted to talk about this. I know it's an extremely controversial topic, and so I will try my best to approach this with sensitivity and care. I want to thank you guys for following along with me and giving me that leniency and patience. Also, if my voice is a little quieter, it is because as of right now, as of this exact moment, it is 4:28 a.m. Guys, please don't base your sleep schedule off of me. But yeah, that might be the reason why I'm a little bit quieter. I don't want to wake my family up. And since this is a heavier topic, I encourage everyone listening to treat this with as much care as you can and just try to be mindful while you're listening so we can offer some respect to both sides of the situation. This episode will probably also be a little bit shorter than the previous ones that we've done. I hope that won't disappoint too many people. And then whenever my next episode comes around, I promise I'll do a little bit more lighthearted topic and I'll make it a little bit longer. As for now, it'll be a heavier topic and it'll be a little bit shorter. So I just wanted to warn you guys of that before we got into it. So without any more further ado, let's get into it. A lot of people claim that MAID shouldn't be offered because obviously there's the whole thing. There's the ethical concerns about it dying and causing people to die. And there's also because there's a lot of studies, or I guess not even studies, anecdotes of people who believe that it feeds into suicidal thoughts from societal pressure. And while that might not be an angle that most people look at to begin with, I think it is a valid concern to have. I argued in my essay that I wrote that MAID should be offered to those who meet the requirements because it is a highly regulated program. And it's also, with the whole ethics debate, it's unethical to let a patient live in suffering against their will, just as much as people consider it unethical to kill people in the name of MAID. So obviously, this is a controversial topic. There's a lot of back and forth that you can go here. For now, I'll be using my sources in my essay, and I'll probably link my sources in the description. If not, yeah, I will link them, don't worry. But I just wanted to let you guys know this is based off of research, and I have put a lot of thought into it, as this is a topic that I was really interested in, and I wanted to make sure that I was able to portray the best information across as I was writing this. So, in this modern day and age, I argued that patients should get the right to decide if they want to go through with MAID, because it's a highly regulated program. That's one of the first things that I was talking about. This issue is big on life and death of the patient, obviously, and there's been a lot of preventative measures to ensure validity of this program. For example, according to one of my articles, apparently only 20% of Americans have access to MAID. It's important to consider every aspect that you possibly can of a situation when it relates to something as big as life and death, of course. And this concept is not really widely adopted through the USA as one might expect it to be. There's a lot of limitations. These limitations can often be found through screening or mental health and physical health evaluations, and it ends up filtering out a lot of people for who is actually, I guess, eligible for MAID. And because of this limitation, it restricts the number of people who want it from actually getting it, and it makes sure that death number stays a lot lower than you might expect it to, which is good. I can see how there would be bad behind that, because I can see how the program, with it being so highly regulated, it might filter out some people who do need it. But it's very good in making sure that people who don't need it don't slip through the cracks almost. It's to differentiate prospects, basically. This extra constraint on the system honestly has proven to be effective in recent years by maintaining a goal of keeping the death rates low while providing access to those who really do need it. And there's a lot of state-based limitations, especially in the US where I live. Different states have different standards and different laws regarding MAID, which is kind of why it's not a nationalized thing, so it's a little hard to go through the process of that. So even in states where MAID is available, just by the way, MAID is medical assistance in dying, just want to make that clear. So even in states where it is available, the program is highly regulated by what I was talking through before, like multiple exams and screening, so it can exclude a certain group of people from receiving euthanasia. These rules specifically exclude people with degenerative disease like Parkinson's disease, and it requires patients, as I said before, to pass a series of rigorous screenings to prove that they are mentally stable. These were set in stone to make sure that every person who is approved for MAID has been cleared based off of professional inspection. Most likely, that professional inspection is done by mental health officers or mental health professionals. So overall, it's only offered to patients whose death is basically inevitable. It's terminal, like long-term terminal illness where there's really no hope anymore, I guess. That's a very somber way to put it, but it is I think that's the best way that I can put it across. So they were set in stone to make sure that it's only offered to patients whose death is inevitable. The choice ends up being the patient's choice, and it's not whether to live or not, it's when to pass away, if they want to pass away sooner or later. Since it actually prevents people who have a long-term illness from dying, many of them continue to live and fight through with family and hospital support. In turn, it prevents regular people who are not terminally ill from slipping through the cracks in the system. Ultimately, I feel that all these facts should be taken into consideration, not only when considering whether a patient should go through with MAID or not, but also consideration when questioning the credibility of the program. Because of how strict it is, I don't think that it's very plausible or even understandable to question the credibility of this program if there was specific evidence for it. So I think that's obviously one thing. That kind of covers my section about the highly regulated nature of the filtering program, and it overall covers that basis. So in addition to these programs' strong regulation, the morality of MAID is less debatable because it's unethical to let a patient live in suffering against their will. Most of the times you'll see the unethical word thrown around in the argument against MAID, that it's unethical to kill people. I wanted to take that point and turn it against for the side that I'm arguing and saying it's unethical to let a patient live in suffering against their will. So of course, free will is one of the most important human values to live by, and the consequences of ignoring this can honestly be downright catastrophic. No matter what religion you are, whether you're even religious or not, what race you are, what nationality, what sexuality, what gender, most people can agree that free will is something that if we didn't have, our lives would be a lot different, and that it's extremely valuable. So when considering the moral aspect of MAID, respect for autonomy is something that oftentimes gets overlooked. And that ends up resulting in patients being forced to undergo a lot of unnecessary suffering when the debates about physician-assisted death kick off. Because there's such a negative view around MAID, many people who fit the checkboxes of receiving it, even with that strict filtering program that I was talking about earlier, end up not going through with it because they're denied the option to choose for themselves. Though a lot of people might seem forcing people to continue to live despite being hurt daily from the illness, from a life-threatening disease, might see it as compassion, even in its own twisted way, it's actually simple, straight cruelty. Though there is a limit for how many people should receive MAID, the number of people who are denied this and the number of people suffering because of this illness have a direct relationship, whether people like to admit it or not. When someone is born, they are given a universal right for autonomy, and its value in decision-making with MAID often gets undermined a lot more than it should. There's also, of course, as I mentioned before, there's a huge moral dilemma surrounding MAID, and it's forced many people to take matters into their own hands, like in case they don't get approved. There has been a hike in illness caused suicide from people buying, for example, Nimbutal. It's a deadly barbiturate, or even people just using a plastic bag to put themselves out of their misery. Now, when you look back to MAID, it's a painless procedure. A pill is given to the patient upon request, and then they make the choice to swallow it to their own. Right until the very moment that it's swallowed, it is completely up to the patient. And so when a patient is denied the right to make that choice, many of them end up resorting to a lot more painful methods to end their lives, such as the barbiturate that I mentioned, or even a plastic bag. Making the decision to die because of terminal illness is a big choice, and of course one must go through it 1,000 times before they come to that choice. And once it is made, for sure, not nothing, but little can be done to prevent it, since death in this situation is inevitable, and it comes back to the autonomy prospect when someone wants to choose which way they die. When using ethics as an excuse to deny this right to patients, people need to consider what is really more ethical in the situation: people dying from a pill, or dying in a more painful method because that pill was taken away from their reach. The true moral compass that people use here is not about MAID and whether it should be offered or not. It's about allowing patients to choose a method with the lesser of two evils, because death is still unavoidable for these patients. I feel like it's a really hard thing for people to accept, especially if they have family who are in this terminal illness situation who want to take MAID. It's very hard for them to accept that at the end of the day they will pass away either way, and at the end of the day it should be up to the patient to decide in which way they want to pass away. And I completely understand this. So of course, understanding this can take a little bit of time. The problem is a lot of people don't want to understand it at all. And oftentimes in today's world, whether it's not even just about MAID, it can be anything from social gathering situations to even politics, a lot of people, it's gone almost out of fashion, I guess, for people to consider multiple sides of a viewpoint. Oftentimes I see people only thinking from one view, and oftentimes I'm not saying that that view is invalid. Of course it can be valid, but it's really important to consider situations, especially if they involve life or death like MAID does, to consider it from all points of view, because there's a huge lack of this ability in recent day society. It's really hard for people to really fully understand this and understand why people want to take this. At the end of the day, we're all human beings, and no one really wants to die. Everyone is fighting every single day for survival, and they don't fight just for their life to end in a terminal illness or for them to end with taking a pill to end their own lives. And taking that decision is a very big step. And it's risky, of course, but when people they want the outcome, they want to be able to peacefully pass away. And so I feel like this should really be considered when using the whole debate against MAID. Now, no matter how many how many points I can give supporting my argument as to why MAID should be allowed, there's one really strong counter-argument that I've seen in my research that people tend to make more. It's like a certain trend that I'm seeing. And this trend that I'm seeing is, despite the reasoning of the system being highly regulated and the whole ethical debate and kind of playing devil's advocate for that, a lot of people argue that MAID is still immoral because it faces situations where it forces patients to make a fatal decision in haste because of societal pressure and expectations. Arguments for this topic have been made regarding how a patient is sometimes forced to receive MAID because of demand from other people and don't have time to think it over. Because it obviously has irreversible effects, with the effect being literal death, it is believed to misunderstand the human nature of wanting to live and having their thoughts influenced by expectations from outsiders who encourage this form of death. It's basically, I'm elaborating on how there's many people who can benefit from MAID or who are terminally ill who don't want to die, and that's totally alright. That's a decision that you make. But supposedly these same people, this argument is saying that these same people are experiencing societal pressure to go through with MAID and just end their misery. While it's possible that some patients might feel uncomfortable with this life-ending decision, MAID is not something that can be taken in haste because of demand. In theory, it may sound like people may influence someone to take MAID and end their life, but when you put it in practicality, any pressure that a MAID patient receives is usually the opposite. They usually experience a stigma and fear of being judged for their life instead of choosing to go through and live. These effects of societal views on MAID are obviously valid, but the issue here is that they're entirely negative, and it is rare, if not almost impossible, to find a person in modern society who will encourage a patient to receive MAID. Every medical professional who gives the green light for a patient to go ahead with this process is expertly trained on knowledge relating to patients' life. When given such a highly sensitive job, it's no wonder that these professionals, obviously, they possess highly sensitive information that can make or break someone's life. So ultimately, discernment among onlookers is always going to persist just because of the general stigma and honestly, might say dishonor that MAID has. But despite this, it's really important to realize that their viewpoint will always be encouraging life over death, regardless of whether life is more painful or not, and that this is not really the type of judgment that affects patients. So while it's valid to consider both sides, it's also necessary to actually be realistic about what you're hearing and what you're thinking. And at the end of the day, MAID, if you take the pill, you pass away. That's how it works. If the patient decides to go through with it, that's completely something different that we can't really control. And if you're worried about morals, you should really worry about whether life is more painful or not with or without MAID, because I feel like a lot of people try to make these patients' decisions for them, and that can end up having some pretty bad effects, because I know most healthy people probably don't know the feeling of having terminal illness or having your life so heavily affected by it that you wish to pass away. These people are not suicidal. I feel like I need to make that abundantly clear. They are not suicidal. They are just simply people who've experienced something as debilitating as a terminal illness. They know in their head that they will die one day, and it takes incredible strength and perseverance to be able to know all the risks of a situation and still persevere forward and decide to take the next step, whether that next step is continuing to live until the illness takes your life, or deciding to end it early and have it be on your terms by taking the option of MAID. And taking that pill will obviously change not only your life by ending it, but also the life of your loved ones, since you will pass away and you will leave that behind. Now, all in all, the debates about MAID's effects are everlasting. This is a continuity that I don't see changing anytime soon, because at the end of the day, you can always have opinions and there's always arguments for both sides, but the sheer amount of moral dilemma that the situation has makes it hard to really come to one conclusion about it and maybe come up with a right or necessarily wrong answer. To recap a little bit on what I said earlier about these preventative measures and screenings, they are conducted by medical professionals who, of course, have careful regard for human life. These preventative measures taken in these programs to ensure maximum efficiency are set into place for a reason. At the end of the day, life or death is the biggest issue here. So to make sure that that is a smooth decision, there are medical professionals there for a reason. When making this heavy decision for a patient, it's important to look towards the future and thinking about how the rest of your life will play out, rather than to dwell on the fear of being ostracized by modern society. Because no one will understand your unique situation except you, and no one will be able to make that connection and make the right decision for yourself except you. Other people's consultants can only go so far, because at the end of the day, you are the one taking this decision if you're in the situation. In the end, human life is obviously a really precious thing, and it must be handled with the absolute most care possible. This care isn't just preservation, by trying to live as long as you can and being healthy, but it also includes the right to be put at rest when the time comes. And judgment from others will only prolong suffering. Compassion has got to be utilized when understanding why someone wants to go through with MAID. It's easy to question someone, but it's not so easy to put yourself in their shoes. Now, at the same time, I'm not saying to open all barriers to MAID. The current restrictive barriers should be kept, while those who have access to it and have passed all the screenings should continue to have the right to exercise their basic human right of autonomy, or honestly, in this situation, it's like choosing your own fate. With the use of these rules, as well as the whole ethical concern and debate and reason that I used, the future will be more secure and practical for all of us, including those who are in this dire situation and need to think about MAID and start considering their options. So all in all, euthanasia and MAID is obviously a very heavy topic to talk about because life and death is never fun to talk about and it's not easy at all. I think it's extremely important to get these conversations out there because it'll not only cause some stimulus and different thinking, but it can open your eyes to things that you've never seen before, and it can make you understand, like maybe you look at a piece of information and you'll realize this does make sense after all. Sometimes it just takes a little bit of convincing, it takes a little bit of elaboration, and that's okay. To be able to bring up a topic like this is truly my utmost pleasure, and I am so grateful that I was able to do this. I'm glad to bring a little bit more awareness to it. For the sources in the description, I think I might just have to MLA cite them, just because for when I did my essay, I MLA cited them. I think that's the best way to put that in. So in the description, all my sources will be there, so you can definitely check those out if you want a few more sources to go along with all my words. So yeah, I'm really glad that you guys stuck with me through these 22 minutes. I mean, it definitely is a shorter episode and recording than our other ones so far, but I believe this is a pretty straightforward topic to talk about. Controversial? Definitely yes. Lots of opposing viewpoints? 100%, 1,000%, 1,000,000% yes. But at the end of the day, it's a pretty straightforward topic, and I'm glad that I got to talk about it with you. And yeah, I'll catch you guys my next episode. But as for now, be on the lookout for our next episode by Barry, which will be coming out next week. Thank you so much for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, guys. Bye!